They called me confused. They called me unsafe. They said I was a danger to my own money and to my own house. They brought a petition to the courthouse and asked a judge to take my life away with a single signature. They wanted a guardian to decide when I could shop, when I could drive, even when I could see my granddaughter. That was the morning I learned what fear tastes like. It tastes like cold metal and lemon cleaner. My name is May. I am 72 years old. I live in a narrow brick house on the east side of Houston. The porch light hums each evening like a patient bee. There is a walnut tree out back that throws shade on the picnic table where my husband once fixed radios and where my granddaughter colors butterflies. I taught history for 30 years. I save receipts. I label freezer containers. I am not perfect, but I am careful. My son is David. He is an only child. His wife is Erin. When my husband died 5 years ago, they drove me to church, brought casseroles, and said I should never worry about money again. I believed them. Then jobs changed and the rent on their apartment went up. I covered a few months. I bought a used car for them when the old one would not start. It felt like love moving through a bank transfer. It did not feel like love when my debit card declined at the grocery store. It was 8 in the morning. The cashier tried the card again and smiled in that gentle way they teach in customer service training. I paid with cash and went straight to the bank. The manager, Mr. Alvarez, knows me by name. He pulled up my profile and frowned. He said there was a fraud alert added to my account at 2 in the morning. He said a concerned relative had called and reported that I might be misplacing cash and double paying bills. He said the card had been frozen to protect me. I walked out into the Houston heat and sat in the car until the air turned from oven to breeze. I thought about the keys that sit in a blue bowl by my back door. I thought about the list on my refrigerator with due dates for water and gas and property taxes. I am a woman who keeps lists. That is not a crime. That afternoon, David came by with Erin. They brought muffins. They sat at my table and used soft voices. Erin said some mornings are hard at your age. David said we love you and we want to help. Erin slid a folder toward me. She said it is a power of attorney. She said I would sleep better if he could pay my bills and watch my accounts. David put his hand on mine and said this will take the pressure off, Mom. Pressure came anyway. I told them I would think. That night, under the porch light, I took my file box from the closet. My husband and I had created a living trust years ago when my knees were still strong and the lawnmower felt light. The trust held the house and my small investment account. The paperwork said that I could revoke the trust or change it at any time while I was competent. It also said if anyone tried to force guardianship without cause, the trustee could hire counsel and charge the expense to the trust. My husband had believed in quiet sentences that guard a door.
The next week brought small alarms. 2 packages that I had not ordered. A magazine subscription I did not want. A neighbor said Erin had told her I sometimes left the stove on. I do not leave the stove on. My kettle whistles and then I turn the flame off. That is the kind of woman I am. I made an appointment with my doctor. She gave me a memory test. I counted backward by 7s. I drew a clock with numbers in their places and hands at 11:10. I remembered 5 words after 5 minutes. I left with a letter that said I was oriented, independent, and capable of managing my affairs. I made a copy for my file box. I also visited Mr. Patel, a lawyer recommended by my church friend. He read my trust and nodded. He said some adult children confuse access with care. He said we would prepare for calm. 2 Fridays later, my doorbell rang. The camera recorded everything. On the steps stood a woman with a clipboard and a badge from Adult Protective Services. She said there had been a complaint. She said a relative had reported signs of cognitive decline. She said she needed to perform a wellness check. I smiled and invited her in. I poured tea. I described my week with dates and times. I handed her my doctor's letter. I showed her the labeled file folders for taxes, utilities, and home insurance. She asked about the frozen bank card. I said a concerned relative had placed an alert without my consent. She asked if anyone had suggested a power of attorney. I said yes. She wrote notes. She stepped onto the porch to make a call. The walnut leaves rattled in a small wind. When she returned, she said there was no cause for action. She said she would close the file. She said I should call if anyone tried to limit my movements or access to funds. I saved her card. 3 days later, a process server handed me a thick packet on my dusty driveway. It was a petition in probate court. David and Erin were asking the court to appoint David as my guardian. They said I was vulnerable. They said I had been scammed online and had sent unknown transfers. They said neighbors had seen me wandering at night. They attached a letter from a pharmacist claiming that I had requested refills for medications I do not take. The hearing was set for 2 weeks from Wednesday. I stood in the kitchen and felt the old fear climb my back. Then I did what I always do. I made a list. I wrote down every bill I had paid in the last 3 months. I printed bank statements. I called the pharmacist and asked to speak to Mr. Green, who has known me for 20 years. He swore he had not written that letter. He said Erin had asked him to confirm that I do not take any regular prescriptions. He had signed a note to that effect. The version in the petition said the opposite. Mr. Patel took his statement. I drove to the bank and met with Mr. Alvarez. He confessed that David had called in the middle of the night. He had used the phrase elder financial abuse. The bank had followed policy and placed a temporary hold. Mr. Alvarez apologized. He removed the alert and placed a note that no third party could freeze my accounts without a court order. He printed it on bank letterhead and signed his name in full.
That evening, I opened my small fire safe. The key is taped under the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a blue envelope from my husband, written in his compact hand 10 years ago, to be opened if difficult times arrive. It was not a secret will. It was a plan. He had set up a separate account at a credit union across town and had placed a pay-on-death designation to Nora, my daughter, and to June. He wrote that if anyone ever tried to manage me without cause, I should keep living with dignity and move liquid funds to that account. I sat under the porch light and cried. The light hummed. The walnut tree brushed the fence. The morning after, at 6, I moved what the law allows. I left enough in my checking to pay utilities and groceries. I printed the credit union receipt and filed it. Then I made oatmeal with raisins and cinnamon and breathed like a person who can hear her own strength. Court day came like summer thunder. The probate courthouse smelled like paper and coffee. The hallway buzzed with families who had forgotten how to speak to each other. Judge Miller wore the kind of face that has seen every story. Mr. Patel sat beside me with his neat stack. Nora sat to my left and squeezed my hand. David and Erin sat across the aisle. Erin wore a severe black dress. David held a folder with tabs like candy. Their lawyer spoke first. He used words like decline and confusion. He told the judge that I had fallen prey to online scams. He waved a printout of a magazine subscription as if it were a felony. He said I had refused help. He said I became agitated when offered reasonable support. Mr. Patel stood with the quiet of a person who believes in paper. He handed up my doctor's letter. He handed up the bank letter removing the hold. He handed up the statement from Adult Protective Services closing the case. He handed up Mr. Green's sworn affidavit explaining that his note had been altered. He explained my living trust. He explained that the house and investments were held in a structure designed to protect me while I am alive and capable. He did not raise his voice. Judge Miller asked to hear from me. I stood and told him how I budget. I told him the due date for property taxes and the name of the man who fixes my fence. I told him how many jars of peaches I can last summer. I told him the 5 words from my memory test, in order: apple, bridge, quarter, candle, walnut. I told him that I still grade my own life with a red pencil when I have to, and that this year, I had replaced guilt with boundaries. Then came the twist I had not planned but had quietly hoped for. Mr. Patel asked to play the doorbell camera video from the wellness check. He asked permission to play one more clip from 2 nights before the petition was filed. The screen on the court monitor blinked. The video showed my front steps at 9 at night. David and Aaron stood under the porch light. Aaron was coaching David on what to say to the bank. She rehearsed sentences about confusion and danger. She laughed and said the word guardianship like a brand new car. When they left, the camera caught one more moment. Aaron turned back and looked straight into the lens. She said, "This will be easy." The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the fabric of my dress move. Judge Miller leaned forward. He asked Aaron if that was her voice. She said she had been stressed. He asked David if he had called the bank at 2 in the morning. He said yes. He said he had acted out of love. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to me. He said, "Mrs. May, I want to thank you for your careful preparation." He said the petition was denied. He said there would be no guardianship. He said the court would appoint a visitor in 30 days only as a courtesy check, and then close the case if the visitor found what he expected to find, which was a competent woman who pays her bills on time and keeps a tidy file cabinet. He was not finished. He turned to David and Aaron and spoke the sentence that lifted the weight from my lungs. He said this court will not be a tool for financial control. He referred the altered pharmacy letter to the county investigator. He warned that further interference with my banking could lead to sanctions. Then he said the words I wish every elder could hear. He said autonomy is not a prize you win. Autonomy is the default. You lose it only when evidence is clear and strong. We walked out into the humid afternoon. The sky was the color of a steel pail. Nora hugged me in the hallway by the vending machines. David came toward me with his eyes glassy. He said, "Mom, I was scared." He said the bills and the car and the rent had made him feel small. He said control felt like safety. I said safety is not something you take. Safety is something you build. I told him I loved him. I told him I needed distance. Aaron stood behind him and stared at the floor. At home, I made tea and set the mug on the ring my husband left on the table 100 mornings ago. I called Mr. Alvarez and asked him to flag my account for my eyes only. I called my doctor and thanked her for her letter. I wrote a note to the judge and mailed it with a stamp that had a barn swallow on it. The porch light clicked on at dusk. The walnut leaves made a slow applause in the evening wind. 30 days later, the court visitor came at noon. She sat on my couch and asked me what day it was. I told her. She asked me about my friends. I told her about church on Sunday and canasta on Thursday. She asked about my money. I showed her the credit union statement and the budget I keep on a yellow pad. She smiled and said she wished every visit were this simple. A week later, a letter arrived. The case was closed. Life grew quiet again. I planted tomatoes. I labeled jars. I taught June how to measure flour with a knife level, not a mound. David started paying down his debts. He sends a text every Sunday afternoon. It says what he cooked that week. It says how many miles he ran. Aaron did not send anything. That is all right. I am not a judge. I am a mother who believes time can sand rough boards. Here is what I know now. If you love an elder, do not take their keys. Sit beside them and ask about their lists. If you are an elder, write the plan on paper while the kettle sings. Place copies where calm hands can find them. Respect is not a favor. Respect is the default. When people call you crazy because you will not hand them your wallet, repeat the 5 words you know by heart. Apple, bridge, quarter, candle, walnut. Then unlock your own front door and step into your own light. Subscribe to Voices by May for more unforgettable family stories.